Holy shit. Hold up. Hold up. He's on his dicks right now.
Hey, greetings. This is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me in my backyard. Um, so, what I wanted to share with you today comes from uh, this person has a cabin just off the Richardson Highway. Uh, you could hear the road noise when vehicles are going by. Uh, we'll, we'll call him Charles. And Charles got this property inherited to him, and the thing of it was when uh, his aunt was informing him, because he had inherited the property from his uncle, and his aunt was informing him that what his uncle had said about the place, that his uncle loved it but didn't like to go there too often because of the wild man in the woods. Now, he just thought maybe his uncle was just a little eccentric and didn't really necessarily buy into it. You know what I mean? So Charles, over the course of 3 years, he would go in and out and, do little improvements, and it was in great shape. He just had to replace an oil drum for the little Toyo stove and whatnot. And so 2 years ago, he decided he was going to spend the summer there and use it as his launching point to go down Copper River Valley, do his salmon fishing stuff and all that kind of stuff. And he figured it'd be good, and because he lives in Anchorage, he figured I'll be closer over there and just enjoy the scenery, take the summer off kind of thing, right? So he does so, and the first week was uneventful. Charles said that it was too peaceful. He didn't hear very many songbirds, and it was very difficult for him to find peace, inner peace, and he's in the middle of a beautiful place, right? And so he chalked it up to maybe it's just the road noise. It's got to be the road noise. It's got to be something, that I'm just not accustomed to. Maybe I'm just a little too used to Anchorage life and, that kind of thing. So he was trying to figure out why he had this real strange, uneasy feeling. So there's a path between his place and where he had parks his truck, right? And it's not very far. It's about maybe 40 yards, and it's just a little trail in between the trees, about same density of trees as I got around me here. Now, it was approximately 9 o'clock at night, which, land of the midnight sun, that doesn't mean nothing. It's just as bright as it is right now, right? So he's walking along, but there's one portion that just seemed a little more dark all the time, right? And he kind of just, his senses told him something's off over here. Maybe there's a bear lurking around, or maybe there's a moose bedded down or something, and he just left it at that. So he walks to the trail, goes to his truck, grabs some things out of it that he had needed, some small propane cans, and he was walking back to his cabin unarmed. He had never seen any bear sign out that way and really had no fear of bears. It's whatever. And so as he's walking back, he's carrying 3 of those little 1-pound Coleman propane cans, right? And he's carrying them kind of like a football player, just kind of just kind of staring at his feet, thinking about what he was going to make for dinner. And as he's going along, off to his left-hand side, he hears walking in that thicker brush just off the trail about maybe 20 feet. He got an eerie feeling and his hair stands up all over his body. And Charles said that when he turned to look, he saw something behind the tree just kind of ducked behind, right? Immediately freaked him out because the height in which this thing ducked back behind some of the trees there, it was much taller than him, and he didn't know what the hell. He just knew whatever it was big, and boom, he took off, he bolted, dropped all 3 of the propane cans. Now he gets to this little cabin, which is this right over there, and he said when he got there, he stopped at the doorway, opened the door, and grabbed a shotgun he kept there just in case, and turned around. And when he turned around, he noticed something dark moving just inside the trees, and he's catching glimpses of it as it's walking, and it's walking away. It's kind of parallel but kind of quartering away at the same time. And he's like, what the hell is that? Because it was coming from directly next to the trail where he just came from, and now it's walking off towards, from his immediately in front of him, kind of quartering away to the right. And as it got to a point to where it would come out into more of the clearing, it got there and turned and just kind of squatted down and was looking right back at him. And he said he couldn't figure out what the hell he was seeing. He said it had to be every bit of 10 foot tall. It was silhouetted. He could not really see any features, but he could see the glint of the light in this thing's eyes, right? So he knew it wasn't someone in a costume. It was just too big. There was no way someone in his eyes, his mind's eye, that could fill a huge costume like that. So as he's sitting there kind of, what the hell am I looking at? He slowly starts raising the shotgun that direction, because he's talking, saying, hey, show me yourself, show yourself, you're on private property, yada yada. This thing's ignoring him until he starts raising that shotgun up to show this person he thought he meant business. And as soon as he starts, bringing that shotgun up, leveling on him, this thing stood back up, and then immediately walked straight away. Just nonchalant, didn't run, didn't nothing, just quietly walked away. He heard some brush and stuff like that. He kind of saw it, in between the trees as it went away. And so he stood there kind of stuck, like, what the hell am I seeing? He goes inside. He's a little shook up. He calms down. He takes his shotgun and goes back and retrieves the 3 little 1 pound propane cans, right? There was only 2 there, and he figured the other one was a little further back, but he was still kind of shook up, so he said, I'll get the other one later, next time I have to go to the truck. He goes back inside, he sits down, still daylight like this, right? He's got all the curtains open, and he's sitting there in this old chair next to the old wood stove, right? The wood stove sat about 3 feet away from his Toyo stove, so if you imagine the corner when you step inside the cabin, you got an old wood stove towards the back of it, off to the left, and then the back wall towards the corner you got the Toyo stove. So he's right back in that area, looking back towards the front door, and he's got 2 windows on either side and 1 window back behind him, but he's out of view of that window. But all the curtains are open, and it's daylight, and he's sitting there going over everything that he had just dealt with. Now, according to what Charles said, something sparked his attention, because as he's looking towards the door and just kind of running things through his mind over and over, he notices a shadow move on where the bed is, because the bed's just off to his right hand, or off to his left hand side from where he's sitting, and the head of that bed is underneath that window, right? And so he sees kind of movement on the, a shadow movement on the bed, so he kind of looks, and he notices it's a weird kind of silhouette. And so he immediately straightens up. He's got the shotgun right off to his right, so he grabs it, and he creeps and starts leaning to look out this window. And as he's leaning, this thing's kind of leaning, and he looks at it, and it's looking him right in his eye. He said he was approximately less than 4 feet away, and this thing looked just as startled as him, because he dropped the shotgun, fell back against the wood stove, hurt the small of his back, and kind of toppled over the wood stove, and was screaming like, expletives and all that kind of stuff, and this thing was gone. I asked him, well, what did you see? Like, did you see anything? And he said that he doesn't remember what exactly he saw, other than the eyes got bigger. He said the eyes, up close the way they were a very bright, like golden yellow color, right? He doesn't remember seeing whites of the eyes or anything, but just bright golden yellow. And he said they were wide set. It was big. And so Once he collected himself off the floor, he scrambles for the shotgun. He said he jumped up and his intuition, lack of intuition, told him to chase it off. So he ran outside. He had hunted a few times. Charles was not the great outdoorsman or anything like that. He had loved to stand on the riverbank and fish and maybe worry about a bear every once in a while. But it was mainly a fisherman thing. He rarely hunted. He had been just a few times, and it wasn't his thing. So when he runs out and he's running towards the back, because the window is on the back side, as he's doing so, he gets around the back and there's nothing there, obviously. Of course, the thing took off. So as he's standing there, he's like, am I losing my... He thought he was losing his mind, right? So he goes, all right, screw this noise. He goes inside, he retrieves his keys, and he takes off. And he had a buddy about 18 miles away or so, and he took off to retrieve his buddy. Now, when he got to his buddy's house, his buddy was a couple sheets to the wind, so to speak. He wasn't full-on drunk, but he was feeling no pain at that time. And so Charles was like, hey, I got some crazy stuff happening over at my uncle's old cabin. Would you come hang out with me? And I want someone else to witness it because I think I'm going crazy. And his buddy was like, yeah, no problem. It wasn't a big deal. And so he gathered up his little nitnoid supplies that he wanted to take with him. They jump back in his pickup and they take off back over to his uncle's cabin. Now it's his cabin. So when they get there, they got to go down that same little trail. And, after explaining everything to his friend's looking for that missing propane can, helping him try to find it, right? And his friend's kind of poking fun at him, like, well, did you throw it at it unwillingly or unwittingly, not knowing? You just kind of grab and throw and run? And he was like, no, I just dropped him, right? So they're going back and forth talking, going down this trail. He still has his shotgun. And as he's going along, off to the left-hand side, there was a small, very small, he said it was about 1.5 inch diameter. It was just a new growth looking pine that maybe was about 2.5 feet tall, but he noticed that it was upside down and the roots were all fresh. So just a tiny spruce tree, I got some of them around here, had been uprooted and turned over off the trail. It made no sense, right? This freshly uprooted little pine tree just stuck into the ground. Almost, he said the root ball, it was pushed in so far, the roots were almost touching the ground. And he said it was the weirdest thing, and him and his friend were looking at it, and they noticed behind it, in some of the fresh dirt, they noticed a couple toe marks, right, from a track. And so they look at that for a minute, and his friend goes, oh man, you must have a Bigfoot. He thought nothing about Bigfoot, right? So they continue on. They just talking about how weird that is. Now, at this point, it's probably 10 o'clock at night. And again, it's Alaska. And so that time of summer, it's probably mid-June, towards the end of June. It does not get dark. It just doesn't. The sun will set technically, but it just stays just below the horizon and it stays daylight. You know what I mean? And it pops right back up in a couple hours. So anyway, it still seems like high noon at 10 o'clock when they get inside. And he goes over and explains what was going on. And as they're sitting there talking, his friend goes, well, here, let me see your shotgun. I'm going to go in the direction that thing walked off and see if I could find any tracks. And Charles thought nothing of it. It was like, yeah, no problem. So what was explained to me is the direction it took off kind of parallels the road. This small game trail kind of parallels the Richardson Highway. So far off of it, he wasn't very good with distances, so I'm guessing maybe 75 yards. And so his friend takes off, and he not being a hunter or an outdoorsman of any real substance, he thought nothing of letting his friend walk with the shotgun alone, right? So his friend's gone for about 20-25 minutes, and all of a sudden comes beating feet back inside the cabin, like out of breath, panting real hard, doesn't have the shotgun, right? And so Charles is like, where's the gun? What in the hell's going on? And he goes, it's behind me. So he's like, what's going on? They're looking out the window on the side where that trail is, and Charles said as they're looking, they see this dark shadow moving through the trees, and all of a sudden they see this thing tumbling. He thought it was a stick at first, right? It was a shotgun. This thing flung the shotgun back at the cabin, and it landed just below the window on the ground. It looked unscathed. I mean, outside of being tossed and a little dirty. And he's in shock, and he's trying to ask his friend, how in the hell did you drop the shotgun? What's going on? This thing is still moving, just out of sight, out of distance, but they could see a big shadow in between the trees off in the distance. Now, it's getting to the time of day where, you know, it gets pretty dark in some of the woods. You know what I mean? Depending on where the sun is sitting on the horizon, it can get pretty dark in the woods, even though the sky is light. And so, with everything kind of being silhouetted, it was hard to make out this movement. And as they're doing so, Charles is like, I'm gonna grab my shotgun. He goes, keep an eye on that thing and bang on the window if you see it coming towards me. We need a gun, because that was the only gun they had. And so he goes outside, he grabs the shotgun, and just as he's coming back around the corner, he said to come up the 4 little stairs to the little porch and go into the house, he heard something. Just kablow! It was loud as hell. He said it sounded like a small explosion, right? And it startled the crap out of him. He dove to the floor, dropped the shotgun again, and when he had dropped the shotgun this time, he had broke it. What he had done is broke the stock off right at the back, so all he had was a little tiny nub and the trigger guard. He no longer had a rear stock on it. He jumps up, he's like, what the hell was that explosion? You know, and so they're in there, they're looking out the window, they're not seeing anything, and they're trying to figure out what the hell just happened, right? Because it was loud. So after they, you know, kind of got themselves together, and his buddy was like, I'll hold the shotgun. You know, I dropped it when I saw it. I ran away. It was squatted down on the trail. It was eating roots or something. I couldn't make it out. I was trying to creep up on it, and then it turned and looked at me. It scared me. I dropped the gun, and I ran right back here. He goes, okay. Well, how big was it? He goes, it was squatted down, and, you know, it looked, you know, like it meant business. And so the description his friend gave Charles was that this thing had a almost black, like leathery looking skin, a lot of wrinkles, and much more than that. He freaked out and took off running, right? So he didn't have the best description. Did comment on the big, bright, golden yellow eyes, though. He said because they stared right through him. As they're discussing this, they're hearing something outside. They're hearing some branches breaking. They assumed it was branches or something getting broken. It was real loud cracking sounds. And so they figured, let's go out. Let's see if we can scare this thing off, you know, or leave. You know, we'll go over to your house or whatever. And so they got their little game plan. They're going to try to scare it off and see what the explosion was about, because he had just inherited this place, you know, a few years before. He, you know, it was just all high strangeness that he just, it was like becoming overwhelming on a level he wasn't expecting. They go out of the cabin and they go out towards the back, and underneath the back corner of this cabin was a rock that had been there since his uncle built the place, and just the cabin was elevated off the ground a couple feet, but there was a rock that had been part of it was probably a very big rock that was just a piece of it sticking out of the ground, and there was all these flash kind of burn marks on it, right? And so they assumed, okay, that's where something happened, and then they started noticing small pieces of that green propane can, the missing one. So what they assumed is this thing chucked this 1 pound Coleman little gas can, propane canister, and it impacted that rock so hard it kind of popped it and made it explode. That's the best they could come up with, because it made no sense. You know, they're finding little pieces of it, and they eventually found the nozzle tip, you know, the little screw top on it, a few feet away. And they were just kind of stuck trying to mentally piece together what the hell was going on. And none of it was adding up. You know, they got this creature, they got, you know, guy running from it. It was just chaotic, right? He said in those moments, his mind was just on a loop of like, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell. So they go inside, they grab the stuff that they were, his buddy had just set down on the table because he was going to stay with them, and then they retreat to the truck. And of course, he brings a broken shotgun. His friend's like, lock your place up, it may try to enter there, let's go. So they go to his buddy's house, 18 miles away. And they're sitting there. They're sitting there at his buddy's house, going over what was going on. He started partaking and having a few drinks to calm down. Charles said as they were sitting there, maybe a couple hours had passed. It had gotten a little darker. The sun had set, but it's still light out. And they're basically calming down. And at his friend's place, there was curtains, but they were open. His friend had the door wide open, some mosquito coils, for the mosquitoes, and his friend smoked. So his friend had the door open, one of the windows in the back open, and just for cross draft because he smoked inside. So as they were sitting there talking, all of a sudden they hear this mournful kind of long moaning sound, is what he said. He said it sounded like a moaning call. Like he couldn't really explain it very well, so we'll leave it at that. It was an odd noise. It was fairly loud and not that far away, so it got their attention immediately. His friend had firearms at his house and just didn't bring them, right? So his friend immediately retrieved his hunting rifle, 300 Win Mag, and they both go outside and they're looking in the direction of this moaning. There's nothing. They don't see anything. So after a few minutes, they go back inside because the mosquitoes were hellacious. They shut the door and they left that back window open. Well, when they were both fairly tipsy and they were going to call it a night, his friend goes walking back, and that open window was in his little room. He had a little single room, a bathroom next to it, and then a little kitchen area with the living room, right there. And he said his friend, walking back to go shut that window, this thing was standing and looking at him in the window. He said he doesn't know how it followed him. He has no clue. His friend, who looked at it again, screamed, come running back out to grab the rifle, ran back in there. It was gone. And he doesn't know how it followed him. And he asked me if I knew, and I was like, I have no clue, dude. I really don't. This was 18 miles away in, a span of a few hours. And I asked, are you sure your friend wasn't just kind of freaking out, panicking? And he said, no, he told me his friend is a solid guy. He's not the one to just make up something to tease somebody or poke fun at him or anything like that. But he said this thing was just standing there in that open window space, just looking at him. And he said he knew it was the one because of the eyes, the bright golden yellow eyes. Freaky stuff, man. He ran back out, grabbed the gun. Of course, thing was gone. The next morning, because they ended up falling asleep after a few hours, they kind of condensed themselves in a corner, windowless corner in the kitchen area, looking out the windows and stuff, keeping an eye out for this thing. The next day, Charles said they went around this guy's property looking for any sign. Birds were chirping, beautiful day. They were there for a couple hours, and then Charles said, I'm going to go back to my house, bring your rifle, let's go and make sure nothing happened over there at the cabin. So they go back over there. Charles said that when he got there was a weird smell, and he couldn't place the smell. It was very animalistic is the best word he could come up with. And I gave him some examples of what it may, what did it smell like, a mix of this or that, and he really had no real answer to that. So it was a weird smell. We'll leave it at that. So as they're trying to figure out the smell, he goes inside, he's looking, there's nothing out of the ordinary, and him and his friend walk around the place a few times, and he said he kept getting the feeling they were being watched. And he told his friend that as they were standing outside next to this oil drum that's off the back corner of the house, that's not too far from that window where he saw the shadow initially, right? He said as they were standing there, he had put like 10 gallons into a 55-gallon drum that was turned on its side up on the stand and kind of kicked up on the end so everything runs to the end, right? And you just leave the cap loosened for the siphon effect. Anyway, all of a sudden you hear this bing. The drum started ringing next to him like something hit it. Bing. And they're just standing there. They're looking around like, what the hell? And his friend found a little rock that had struck this drum. And Charles said, man, I'm over this. Let's go. They go back around, and as they're walking back over to the front door for him to go in and collect his stuff, bing, just one after another, bing, just kept hitting this drum. And he said it about drove him nuts, because every time it rang, it startled him more, and it just made him more uptight and tense. So he gathered up his stuff, locked the door. Now keep in mind, they're leaving. The trail is just off the front porch that cuts through the trees, just off to the right, about that 40 yards to where he parks the truck. Around the corner back behind him is that drum. So they're walking back over towards the truck. His friend's looking around with his rifle trying to see what he can see, and the whole time that he said every few seconds, bing, that drum would ring again, right, with the rocks hitting it. They hop in the truck. He drove his friend home, told him, hey, thanks, I'll leave my keys with you for that place. Keep an eye on it every once in a while for me. And Charles has not been back. He left, he went home, and he's not sure what to do. He's not sure what he did to spark the harassment. He's not sure what his uncle did, and he's kind of at a loss at this point. He's going to get a hold of me later on this season. There's some other people out there off the Richardson that have had experiences near their property. And from my understanding, because he wanted to keep the place anonymous, I told him don't get too specific. It's whatever's whatever. But I have a sneaking suspicion that this place of Charles's is probably right in line with these other places that have had these things show themselves, walk across the property, looking in windows, all sorts of different stuff. But I want to thank Charles for sharing, and I encouraged him to watch the episode when it airs and whatnot. He said he'll think about it, but he's at a loss. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what sparked it all. He said it was some of the craziest things he had ever dealt with in his life, and I could totally understand. Let's see, what else was there? I can't think of anything offhand right now. Something's coming up in the near future, but I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to thank Charles for sharing, and we will catch you guys on the next one.